Welcome to another episode of Well-Adjusted Mama. I'm your host, Dr. Laura Brayton, and today's guest is Kim Vopni. She'll be speaking on protecting your core during pregnancy and beyond. Kim is a self-professed pelvic health evangelist and is also known as the Vagina Coach. She is a certified fitness professional who became passionate about spreading information on pelvic health when she was pregnant with her first child. She is a published author, a passionate speaker, and women's health educator, as well as a mom to 2 boys. Kim is the founder of Pelvienne Wellness Inc., a company offering pelvic health programs and coaching for women in pregnancy, motherhood, and menopause. She's also the co-founder of Bellies Inc., a company focused on improving births and postpartum recoveries with the revolutionary AB system. You can find her online at vaginacoach.com, belliesinc.com, and on social media at Vagina Coach and at Bellies Inc. Welcome, Kim. Happy to have you on the show today.
Thank you so much for having me.
So my audience would love to hear a little bit about who you are and Bellies Inc. and essentially why you're passionate about helping to support women in their fitness and core strength during the perinatal phase of their life.
Sure. So I got into the world of pelvic health through my own pregnancies. And there was a product that I had used in my pregnancy that really helped me. And I ended up becoming a distributor for it and had pelvic health physiotherapists referring to me a lot. And at the time, I actually had never heard of a pelvic floor physio. So I spent a lot of time with them learning about what they do and how they support women. And that was kind of this is probably it's about 15 years ago. And I remember thinking, how could it be that not every single woman who is giving birth and becoming a mother seeing a pelvic floor physio? And that kind of became my big mission, was to announce to the world that everybody should see a physio. And so I became a distributor for that product. And then I was reaching out to other people who were talking about the same things as me. And at the time, it was really hard to find people, actually. But I did find a couple of women. I'm from Vancouver, but was living in Toronto at the time, and found a couple of women, one of which is a pelvic floor physio. And the 3 of us sat down and talked about what we were dealing with our clients and even ourselves. We were all moms ourselves, and how we were working with women during their pregnancy and in the postpartum phase. And what we found was the recovery piece was really overlooked. There wasn't a lot of information or support given to women during that time. And we found that women who opted to pursue kind of an intentional recovery protocol or strategy were doing better than women who were sort of waiting for that 6-week green light and then going back to their regular activities. And what the 3 of us did is we formed our company, Bellies Inc., and we designed a postpartum recovery wrap. And we took it a step further and actually gave women information about the prenatal phase as well. So that kind of fueled my passion, and all of us had a collective passion. And really, it's been a journey since then of trying to bring the philosophies of other cultures around the world that practice something called mother roasting or mother warming, and trying to bring that to the mainstream, to North American women, to modern day motherhood. And it has been a passion and remains a passion of mine. And I'm sure it will remain that way for life.
Mm-hmm. So there's a couple points that you made there. Is you hinted about a product that you have. I personally used the product in my postpartum recovery 2 years ago, and it was really helpful. It was recommended by the amazing pelvic PT in my practice. And while I was pregnant, I was asking her about hey, which wrap would you recommend? And she told me Bellies Inc. And it really was very helpful for after birth, after pregnancy, the whole entire abdominal wall has been stretched out. So it's just about helping those tissues heal after the intensity of pregnancy and birth. So it was helpful for me. I love that your product also includes exercises and support during the prenatal phase to actually help prepare for birth. It helps, have an easier labor and delivery, and also for a better recovery. So there's a lot of preventive mindedness to the product, which I also really resonate with.
Yeah.
So let's talk a little bit more about that, and then we'll go into mother roasting.
Yeah. So I have always come from a place of prevention. So when I was pregnant with both of my babies, especially the first one, I was really determined to have a different birth experience and also kind of life than my mom. And I don't mean life in a really bad way. I just mean that she had pelvic floor challenges. She had a tummy she was never happy with. She had chronic back pain. She ended up having surgery for incontinence in her 50s. And so the picture that was painted for me at a very young age was not something that I really wanted to participate in. And when I chose to start a family, I really wanted to be proactive and do whatever I could to have a different story than my mom. And so the birth prep product that I use, it's called the Epino. Unfortunately, it's no longer available in North America, but it is available in Australia and Europe. If you can get your hands on one, it's amazing. So that was a pelvic floor birth preparation device. And so that's really, as I said, I've always been from a prevention perspective. And when we started Bellies Inc, we had that same mentality in mind. So while we were creating something that was going to assist in the postpartum recovery, we couldn't overlook all the preparation that we could be doing ahead of time as well. So the program that I had developed is called Prepare to Push, and it's very much focused on using the principle of specificity from fitness to train the body specifically for the demands of labor and birth. And we pay a huge amount of attention to the pelvic floor and the abdomen. And then the Bellies Inc piece came in from, the core confidence exercises that we have, which were the birth prep core exercises that we wanted women to start while they were pregnant, so that once they had their baby, we didn't want to give them a new set of recovery exercises that they needed to learn on top of learning to breastfeed, working on lack of sleep, and experiencing this new role as a mom. You don't need any more new things tossed at you. So we wanted people to have the exercises to be practicing during their pregnancy, so that once the recovery protocol, so to speak, started, they just fell back into it. They already knew what to do and their body was familiar with that. So we really kind of take that prepare, recover, and restore philosophy and grouped it together. And the wrap, as you had mentioned, the muscles in the abdominal wall, the muscles in the pelvic floor, the tissues, they all undergo fairly significant stretch and strain. There can be some nerve compression as well. And so the core system, after we have given birth, is somewhat hindered in its ability to contribute to core control and all of the roles that it does for us. And so our philosophy is that, one, if we have used intentional exercise and specific exercise going into it that targets the core and pelvic floor, then it will remain strong through pregnancy, perform better in birth, but then also recover more quickly postpartum. But also, when we can offload those tissues temporarily, with our wrap, then it allows the muscles to regenerate better, as in our philosophy. When they are, let me back up. When the muscles and tissues are stretched beyond their optimal length, they're hindered in their capacity to contribute to that core control. So when we provide the physical external support while the internal support is rebuilt through exercise, the outcome is better. And the differentiating factor with our wrap is we are not focused on the waist or directly on the abdomen like many quote unquote waist trainers are. We really focus on supporting the pelvis and the lower abdomen. And when we can support the pelvis, then the regeneration of the pelvic floor and core connection can happen better. And then it kind of translates up the chain, so to speak, because we need the pelvic floor to generate the tension in the abdominal wall. So we really want the pelvis to kind of be that main source of the main area that we are providing the support to, and making sure that all of the recovery exercises are pelvic floor initiated.
Right. That's the foundation for the core. So that makes a lot of sense. The other thing I appreciated with the wrap is, especially after giving birth, there's challenges sometimes with incontinence, and a lot of those wraps, other wraps possibly are pushing down on the bladder and causing more incontinence issues.
Mm-hmm.
So this wrap, from what my experience was more about lifting instead of pushing down.
Yeah, exactly. And we sort of came onto the market around the time when waist training was becoming really popular, and we continue to have to I guess educate and make sure people understand that we are not a waist trainer, and that waist trainers can be damaging. When you really cinch tightly something around the waist, it creates pressure, and by nature of gravity, that pressure most often goes downwards. It can go up as well, but downward pressure can contribute to the development or increasing symptoms of organ prolapse. And yeah, it can be very damaging, really, and it interrupts with breath patterns. It can interfere with digestion. And so we wanted to make sure that ours, again, it focused on the pelvis, and that it was also, as you mentioned, we wrap from the bottom up rather than from the waist down. And it is really not focused on the waist. It's really focused more on the pelvis and the lower part of the abdomen. And it helps, especially in those early weeks postpartum. It helps support the uterus in its return to its normal size. It offloads pressure from the pelvic floor. Women who've had cesarean births, many people find it's different. Actually, I should say that some women prefer just to use the tank tops initially and then wrap afterwards. Other people like the wrap right away. I remember we were at a midwifery conference, and a midwife came by our table, lifted up her shirt, and she had the wrap on backwards, and she said, "Oh, I'm wearing your product and I love it." And we said, "Well, you have it on backwards." And she said, "No, I realized that I actually like it this way." She liked the additional support that the lumbar pad had against her incision, because she had a cesarean birth. And so we hadn't designed it that way and thought of it, but she brought light to a different use, which we recommend now to people all the time. And many people find it helpful. But yeah, wrapping from the bottom up really is key. And the fact that we also used elastic in the arms of our wrap, because we need, one, it shrinks with you, it moves with you, and it also allows you to breathe, because really at the end of the day, the core will restore when the breath is working with it. And we need to make sure that the breath is not hindered in any way, shape, or form.
And then typically, how long do you recommend women wearing these wraps after birth?
When we designed the product and the program, we used a piece of research that showed that the first 8 weeks postpartum are when spontaneous healing has happened, and that beyond the 8-week mark, sort of whatever you have at the 8-week mark postpartum is what you have, unless you have any other interventions such as exercise protocols or what have you. So we wanted to harness that initial 8 weeks, and we designed the exercises with 8 exercises that are done. You add one exercise each week, so by the 8-week mark you're doing all 8 of them. And we initially, when we first started, we were having people wrap for the entire week, 8 weeks, but we now kind of make the guideline to say you can wrap up to 8 weeks, because there are some people who need it the 8 weeks. There are some people who need it maybe 1 to 3. There are people who might need it 12 to 15. There's all sorts of different variations in there. And the most beneficial time, at least in my opinion, is those first early weeks. So the first kind of 1 to 4 weeks, where there's, gradual movement, but really the focus is really still a lot on resting. So the general guideline now is, you can wrap up to 8 weeks, but most people are weaning off sort of around that 3 to 4 week mark, or maybe using it only when they're moving and not all day, every day, up to that point. So there is some variation in there, but, I say most people are averaging around the 4 to 6 week mark in terms of use.
I'm trying to remember for myself. I think I ended up using the tanks like longer, because they just gave like mild support without the actual wrap. And the wrap, I came back to my office 5 weeks postpartum. So I was adjusting patients
Wow.
part
Yeah.
time, but
Wow.
still I was like, I had my wrap on when I was doing, manual labor like that.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's what a lot of people do too. I actually just did I'm often surveying our customers so we can kind of keep track on what they're liking or not liking or how we can change. And I always ask how long they use it for. And I just read it this morning, and so far I have about 160 responses. And the bulk of it was between 4 and 7 weeks, actually. So people who bought the system were actually somewhere between the 5 to 7 week mark. And the people who bought just the wrap were a little bit less, and they were sort of around the 4 to 6 mark. And exactly as you just said, the people who buy the system will often kind of extend their use period and transition away from the wrap and the tank together and just wear the tank for a little bit longer. So um, I think the system gives people the variety and the options to
Mhm.
have just the tank and, later on, or some people start with just the tank, as I said, after cesarean birth.
Mhm.
Um, but yeah, especially for women who are going back to work quite soon or have very manual jobs like yourself, many of them wear it for a little bit longer while they're working or for a few hours a day.
Yeah. So that was really helpful. So, speaking of mother roasting, which I probably could have practiced better myself, let's speak about what is that. And I think it's, quite common in other parts of the world, but like you mentioned, North America, it's not quite as well known.
Yeah, I actually don't even remember where I first learned about it, but when I did, I remember reading it and having kind of that same moment of, how can it be that not everybody is practicing this, similar to when I first met the pelvic floor physiotherapist. And it's called many different things. The practice itself is called many different things in different cultures around the world. But if you were to do any Google searching around it, you would come up with articles that would use the global term of mother roasting. Sometimes you might hear it called mother warming. And the philosophy is that the body opens during pregnancy and birth, and it needs time to close in the postpartum period. And the most common period of time is the first 40 days. There's actually a really good book called The First 40 Days that talks about the nutrition piece. But the belief is that what you do in the first 40 days postpartum will set you up for the next 40 years. So the practices focus around nourishing the mom, replenishing lost qi, as they say in Chinese medicine, making sure the body stays wrapped and warm, because when the body is open, it is susceptible to cold, or in Chinese medicine, they say wind. And so by wrapping the pelvis and the abdomen, by using warm, nourishing foods and soups and bone broths and all sorts of collagen-rich foods, it really helps replenish all that has been lost through pregnancy and birth in that mom. So the woman is really is nurtured and supported and has a team of people who are caring for babe, but caring for her as well. And it's in our culture, in our society, there's a belief that we as women and moms we've got it all together. We can do this. We don't need help. And it's almost like there's maybe a bit of shame in asking for help or accepting support. And I think, especially as you just said, you were back to work at 5 weeks postpartum, which you have your own business. And it's also in the United States, the basically the 6 week mark is when you are supposed to return to work. And, in Canada, it's actually been extended now beyond 1 year. So I had a year off, complete
Oh,
year off.
wow. That's
And
amazing.
it is amazing. It really is. And I remember thinking at 6 weeks, after I had given birth the first time, I could not fathom having to go back to work. I couldn't fathom that. But I know that's a reality for so many women. And so the the philosophies, the traditional practices from elsewhere around the world, we at Bellies Inc, we were trying to embrace some of those in the creation of our product and the information and kind of recovery strategies that we share with women. And so we designed our wrap, obviously, so we're incorporating the wrap to help close the body. And when closing the body is kind of, if you can imagine this, well, you don't even have to imagine you've had a baby, but you know there's been stretch, and you know the muscles have moved away from the midline and the abdominal wall. You know that, especially if you've had a vaginal birth, that the tissues in the pelvic floor and the vagina and the perineum have stretched, and everything, you can visualize very clearly the openness that happens, and taking time to allow that to close is, from a diastasis recti perspective, can we encourage the muscles back to the midline? We know that the gap is not the biggest deal, but it's interesting. And I think that if we have an opportunity to encourage the muscles closer to where they are supposed to be, more optimally closer to the midline, then we should do that. If we have an opportunity to re-engage and reignite the core and get the pelvic floor active again and doing all the jobs that it's supposed to do, then we should. And in North American culture, I believe and see that women are applauded for a quick return to the gym, or for looking like they never had a baby.
Right.
And, after 9 months of, if you look on Instagram, any pregnant woman is wearing the most form-fitting clothing and showing off their beautiful bellies. And as soon as the baby is born, it becomes a place of shame, and then a place we need to cover up and hide. And unless it looks completely flat, we don't want anybody to see it. So there's lots of different influences from a social media perspective, and in our culture, the beliefs are really not around having a village to help the mom and a village to help raise the baby. It's very much I can do it. I've got this. I'm super mom. And that's a lot of pressure, I think, for women to deal with. So
it's a lot of pressure. And I had an amazing postpartum doula for myself after I gave birth, because I didn't have family support. I didn't have a mother-in-law that was able to come and help take care of me after I gave birth. So that's where I hired someone, and she was so good. And I was having a conversation with her last week, with postpartum mood disorders. She's like, 1 in 2 women she works with has it, whether it's anxiety, depression, whatever. And this is a real thing. And I think that it's becoming so prevalent because of this lack of support, lack of community, or this expectations that culturally are put on women after giving birth that are really unrealistic.
Yeah, 1,000%. And when you add on top of that, there's, in terms of the actual physical body. So afterwards, many women have some degree of organ prolapse, and many women may have experiences with incontinence. And, there's, as I mentioned before, shame around the belly, and all of those on top of all of the other challenges and pressures that they're facing can just be an extra layer that they might be dealing with. So when you can support women and normalize the changes that have happened, but also help support the recovery so that the body can heal appropriately, then that goes a long way in terms of helping the mind as well. And really not, in Bellies Inc. with the wrap, we're giving physical support. We have exercise for rebuilding the internal support, but it's really about, we kind of look at the wrap almost like when you have a fussy baby, you swaddle them. And the wrap is kind of like, in a weird way, a swaddle for the mom, because sometimes you feel vulnerable and you feel alone and you feel unsure, and you're not quite, your confidence level has been altered. And if we can give some physical support and the resources of rebuilding the internal support, but then also the philosophy of having that village and encouraging women to do things like you did, hiring a doula, even if you have family support, hiring a doula is something that we full-heartedly support and recommend.
Mhm.
But yeah, having the resources available to you, especially in those early weeks postpartum. So you have the support. That's really the word that I use the most. You want to feel supported in all ways.
Yeah. And the support, to your point, the wrap is a physical support, but there's a mental, emotional, and even spiritual level of support that all new mothers require. And, I would love to see less shame, and like you said, around that it's birth itself is about being vulnerable. It is about surrendering, and that really would extend into that new motherhood as well. And I think it's beautiful. It's the ultimate feminine act, right? And being feminine and being vulnerable and surrendering is actually quite lovely for women to experience. And I think it's important, and it's not weak. It's not about giving away your power. It's actually really standing in your power while you're vulnerable, right?
Exactly. Yes, you come into your power very much so, and it can be very scary. And that's again part of the reason from a preparation perspective is knowing what it means to surrender, and knowing how to support your body, and having practiced ways while you're still pregnant puts you in more of a position of power and confidence as well. So when you're not, because sometimes you go into birth, many people go into birth thinking, well, I'm not sure, I'm just going to hope for the best, or I know women have done it before. And when you're informed, you are in a position of power, and sometimes you're confident, and you can step into that power more readily, or potentially more easily, maybe.
There's no doubt. And I think a lot of that is that subconscious mind and the beliefs that a woman has about herself, her ability to birth, that plays a big role in the actual outcome of the birth, and whether she's created an empowered or disempowered birth for herself. So this is really all so important.
Yeah. And I think the images that we often see in social media is becoming way better. There's amazing accounts and images that we can see now on in social media. However, up to a certain point, pardon me, it was really, images around birth were quite scary. It was always painful. It was always women screaming, and it didn't paint a picture of some place that women really wanted to be, or that they were feeling confident to go to. And there's so much more education now and awareness, and amazing practitioners that are teaching education around birth, and also that we had lost our village. But pregnancy and birth were something that were children saw their mothers, their aunts, their sisters, doing. And it was part of the culture growing up. And in our world, we see birth on the media, where it's portrayed quite negatively in a lot of ways. So I think the fact now that there's been a lot of movement towards empowered birth images and stories and videos, I think that's helping a lot for women to see what normal physiological birth looks like, and see how powerful the women really are. It can be very, very inspiring.
Yeah, I mean, you practice in Canada. What's it like up in Canada with birth and birth, home birth or midwife births?
Yeah, it's definitely becoming way more common. I used a midwife in the hospital for both of my babies, and that was again 15 and 12 years ago. And I had watched my sister-in-law give birth, and she used a midwife. And up to that point, the term midwife to me was something kind of, it was like witchcraft almost. It was something that was like, oh my gosh, a midwife, how, like, is that safe? And you had all these misconceptions around it. And when I witnessed my sister-in-law giving birth, and she was in a hospital as well, I again had one of those moments like, oh my God, how can it be that not every single woman is using a midwife? Like,
Right.
it really was shocking to me. And then the more I learned afterwards, and I still know now, I think every woman should birth with a midwife. And at the time, again, doulas, I knew one person who had used a doula, and I was very unfamiliar with the term. And now, again, I also think that doulas play such an incredible role in supporting the mom, supporting the woman during birth. A team of a midwife and a doula together, I think, is really, really incredible.
Yeah.
So it's becoming way more common. There are some movements, and there are a couple of birth centers. Home birth is definitely becoming more popular as well. I know the majority still is for hospital births, but there are a lot more hospital midwife supported hospital births. So, so I think it's improving overall.
Mm-hmm. Oh, that's good news. So the U.S. needs to look up to Canada. We're like at the bottom of the barrel for our infant and maternal mortality out of first world countries. It's really quite shameful. So
it's shocking, really. You know, we think we live in these, you know, North America being such a, you know, first world and everything. We have all this technology and all these amazing things. Yeah, and we're falling short in a lot of ways. So we've got some room to go, but things are changing. Things are changing for the better.
Mm-hmm. I love that. So, did you have any like last thoughts that you wanted to share with the moms listening in?
Well, I think the other the other piece to this is that once you're postpartum, you're always postpartum, and it's important to pay attention. So the recovery strategies that are practiced and that we promote in the early weeks postpartum are very intentional and with the aim of, you know, setting the woman up for those next 40 years. But that doesn't mean that once that, you know, initial quote unquote postpartum period is over, that you just carry on and you forget about your pelvic floor. So it is something, in my opinion, that you need to keep in check for the rest of your life. And my persona online of Vagina Coach is really focused on supporting, giving women options, I guess, with regards to pelvic floor exercise, because the next phases, especially for women who've given birth, they are fed messages from the media that implies that light bladder leakage is just part of being a woman, and that as you get older, you just need to wear pads, and that's just how it is once you've had babies, or again, because you're aging. And I wholeheartly disagree with that and those messages. And so I really want women to know that, and even if you've never had a baby, that the pelvic floor is something that's really, really central to so many things that we do in our life. And we want to make sure that we move in ways that supports our pelvic health, and that we do move. I think some women, especially after they've had a baby, may be fearful of movement because they think they might make diastasis worse, or if they do have some incontinence, they think now that, you know, they don't want to run and jump anymore because maybe that's going to make it worse, or maybe they're ashamed from it, and they don't know that there's help, and they don't know, you know, they just think it's quote unquote normal. So my parting messages are also that the pelvic floor is something that we need for life. You need to move in ways that supports it. And every single woman, in my opinion, should see a pelvic floor physiotherapist every single year, even if you have no symptoms. So similar to how we see a dentist every year, even if we have no cavities, we go in for a checkup and a clean and make sure we sort of get screened for cavities. And the pelvic floor, in my opinion, is very similar. We have professionals that can assess our pelvic floor and screen for challenges that can be really life-altering if we don't address them. So things like prolapse and incontinence, pain with sex, you know, chronic back pain, all those types of things are often very, very treatable if you have the right people, if you have the right team. And so my parting words are see a pelvic floor physiotherapist annually.
I love that. I know it was hugely helpful for me after I gave birth. I was having exercise incontinence, and I was like, that was the only thing that was able to really resolve it, was getting the internal work done, and then being instructed on exercises to help restore my pelvic floor.
Yeah. And I think, you know, again, with that kind of the culture we live in, where there's a bit of a race almost to get back into your skinny jeans and back to the gym, when the core restoration work hasn't happened, because really at the end of the day, things like incontinence and prolapse are there's signals that the body is sending saying that something, the synergy in the core is off somehow. There's some sort of, pressure management problem that needs addressing. And without that core restoration work, and you take that new body, that the body that has been transformed through pregnancy and birth and is potentially not yet ready to handle loads of quote unquote regular activities, which a lot of women, especially after they've given birth, they will go to a really hard exercise class first because they want to lose the baby weight and they want to get their body back and they want to feel strong again. So they're often attracted to things like boot camp and CrossFit and running. And I have no problem with those activities when they're done with a core that's ready for it. And when they're done too soon postpartum, it can really set the women up for challenges long term. And you'll perform better, you'll be stronger, you'll run faster, you can lift more weight if those are your goals when your core is working properly. So that intentional 8-week postpartum recovery protocol, and then a pelvic floor physiotherapist appointment around 6 weeks, and then ongoing every year is really, really essential for long-term pelvic health. So not going back too soon. I always say mommy and boot camp do not belong in the same sentence. And it's not saying that you can't ever go back to boot camp, but do the core restoration work first and allow your pelvic floor physio to give you the green light to add on the additional loads. So usually that's around 4 to 6 months postpartum as opposed to 6 weeks.
Mm-hmm. So true. I think it's important to really respect and listen to your body and honor its recovery and, remembering like how much your body went through to make that baby and birth that baby. So it does take time, and, it's important to honor that. If we rush, you're prone to injuries and actually, creating damage, so it's very important.
Exactly. Yeah. And to think that, when we think about all of the adaptations that the body goes through in pregnancy, and then there's a birth on top of that, sometimes a surgical birth, it to me is unrealistic to think that at 6 weeks postpartum, everything is back to the way it was before. After 9 months of adaptation, it's more like 9 months of, different adaptations. And now it's adapting to a body that has birthed, and then supporting that body through the recovery rather than, waiting for that 6 week green light and going back and really not paying a lot of attention to that, all those changes. So yeah, just changing the mindset really.
Mm-hmm. Wonderful. Well, Kim, I am so grateful for you taking the time to come on and share with the audience your wisdom regarding having a strong, healthy core and pelvic floor.
Thank you very much for having me. It was really great chatting with you.